There are three basic types of fill color layers: solid, gradient, and pattern. In this document in Photoshop, it's blank and it only has a blank white background that's currently locked. Normally, when you're doing a design, you either want to stick with white because you're going to have a lot of color on the design, or you want to have a more colorful background because you don't have as many colors in the actual objects that are going to go on there. So let's say this was a totally text-related flyer, then we would definitely need to add some color in the background. Though why it would just be text in its Photoshop, I don't know. But let's go ahead and add some fill layers. So right now we just have our basic background layer and we want to add a solid color above it to see if that's where we want to start with our design. So I'm going to go down here to this kind of half white, half black circle, and it has a little tooltip that says create new fill or adjustment layer. Now for the adjustment layers, you can choose them from this menu or you can choose them from the actual adjustments panel. But in the adjustments panel, you don't have the option to create a solid color layer, gradient layer, or a pattern layer. So I'll click solid color, and it's going to first choose whatever color was originally in your foreground picker here. So I can change whatever color I need to and kind of get a color I want. Now, if I wanted to change that solid color layer, I could double click right here on the thumbnail and I can come in here and change the color to whatever I want it to be. Or I can add a new solid color if maybe I was debating between a couple of different options. That way I can turn one on and one off and I can see which one I prefer. Now there are other options. You can add gradients as well. I can click again this button to create a new gradient layer, and when you choose a new gradient layer, these are just the basic controls for the whole gradient itself. So I can do a linear gradient, that's going to be a straight line either up and down or left and right, and I can change the angle and I can change the scale of it, and I can even reverse it. So if I hit reverse, all of a sudden you see purple on this side. Again, it was picking whatever was in my foreground color. Now if I don't like this purple to transparent, that's what it's trying to show you, the foreground to transparent. If I don't like that, I can click right here to edit the gradient. Now you don't want to click on this name because nothing's going to happen, and if you just click on this drop down, it's only simply going to allow you to pick whatever gradients are available to you in this gradient picker. What you want to do, and I'm going to change that so you can see this, what you want to do is click right here in the center, and that's going to bring up this gradient editor. Now you can see all those presets that Adobe creates for you, and I can see more than you probably see right now, but I can click on each of these, and some of them are truly hideous, so I never ever use them. But also if you go to this little gear, you can choose large thumbnails so you can see bigger versions, and you can even choose from a couple of different gradient effects. So now at the bottom I have these new ones, and I can go to spectrums and click Append is going to add them at the bottom. So I can come here and choose a spectrum, and with each of these you can choose your own color stops. So let's say for this one I didn't want red and I didn't want green. I can just click on a color stop and drag it down, and it's moved. Now I can adjust where those color stops happen. So this one, maybe it has only a little bit of blue and it has quite a lot of pink and yellow. And then once I click either the pink or the yellow, you can see this little tiny triangle in the middle that adjusts where the fade between the colors happens. So if I get really close to pink, you can see it starts to have a really harsh line because there's not enough space to get from pink to yellow. It doesn't look bad, but you know, it's not as smooth. So I can kind of move these around and give blue a little bit more space. And if I wanted to add a pop of green, let's say right here, I can click between these two color stops in this empty area, click, and now I have a new color stop that I can come in and choose a green color for. So now I have green back in my document, and it's taken up a little bit more than I want, so I'm just moving them around, and there's my custom created gradient. Now if I like this gradient and I'm going to be using it all the time, again I probably won't use rainbow gradients truly probably ever, But this is just an example. If I wanted to keep this, then I can click save, and then I can save it into my gradients folder. Now, if you are on a public machine, you probably won't have the ability to do this because this is probably locked. But if you're at home, then you can definitely save it. So I'll go ahead and click OK. And there's linear gradients, there's radial, where it's going to move from the center outward in a circular pattern. There's angle gradients that are going to show a lot of depth. Then we have reflected and diamond. So again, you can change the scale of those gradients, and you can definitely change the angle of those gradients and reverse them as well. So that's the basic gradient layer. The last fill layer we need to talk about is the pattern fill. Now the pattern fill is kind of weird. If I click on pattern, it's going to bring up a bunch of patterns, and you might not have a lot in your library. I do because I've went to this gear and I've chosen some of these libraries. So I can choose any one of these patterns here, and I can scale that pattern so I can make it a little bit bigger. And it's not necessarily the coolest pattern ever, and it might be a little bit distracting in my design. But here's what we're going to do with this pattern, and this is a great way to add texture to any of your designs. I'm just going to leave the pattern as is, and don't discount some of these patterns. Some of them look really hideous, but when you actually use blend modes, they end up creating really cool textures. So I'm going to go back to this one so you can kind of see what's happening, and I'll click OK, and here we have our regular pattern fill. Now the cool thing about this is it's above that gradient layer, which I'm going to go back. I don't like that, so I'm going to reverse it back and scale it back up. So again, this is just a really garish gradient, so I probably wouldn't normally do it. But right now this pattern is definitely covering it up. But if I click on that pattern fill and I go to a different blend mode, it's going to add some texture to that color, because a blend mode basically takes this layer, whatever layer you're on, and it blends it with different kind of rules or algorithms here. It blends it with the layer directly underneath it. So if I do linear burn, or let's say lighten, or I can do soft light, and it just gives a really cool texture to it. And I can change the opacity so it just has a hint of a pattern. I can mess with that, and I can turn off the gradient layer, and I can turn on any one of these color layers and kind of see what's happening with that blend mode. So those are the basics of working with fill layers. Now we just need to figure out how to apply a fill layer just to one tiny part of a document, not the whole thing.